Good afternoon. More volume, thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. A little bit more. Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Ladrigas Murray, and we're about to get started. I'm going to introduce our master of ceremony for the afternoon. If you're here in the DMV area, you've heard him. This is Mr. Guy Lambert. He's the news director for WPGC 95.5, but he says it much better than that. We want you to give a warm welcome to Mr. Guy Lambert.
Testing, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2. There we go. Just a little bit louder for me, please. All right, thank you. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome. If you're visiting Washington, D.C. for the first time, welcome to our city. We are so glad that you are here this afternoon. I got to tell you, I got a call from Ladrigas, I guess about maybe 3 or 4 weeks ago, and he said, Guy, we're having an amazing event, and I would love for you to come by and MC it. And I got to tell you, recently had him on my radio show, of course, at WPGC, and well, we were just chit-chatting about all the amazing things the UNCF happens to be doing, and well, folks, I got to tell you, it got me really excited. And it just reminded me of the time of the 3 guys that were excited to be standing at the pearly gates of heaven. Well, they walked up to St. Peter, and St. Peter said, guys, I got some great news for you. All 3 of you all are getting into heaven, but heaven's a pretty big place, and as a result, I got to give you a car. Now, the car I give you is based upon how you treated your wife. Uh-oh. Well, the first guy walked up to St. Peter and said, St. Peter, I was with my wife for some 5 years, and I got to be honest, of those 5 years, I cheated 2 times. St. Peter handed him the keys to a Pinto, ladies and gentlemen. Fast forward to the second guy. He walked up to St. Peter and said, St. Peter, I'm a lot better than the last guy. I was with my wife for some 10 years, and, well, of those 10 years, I cheated once. St. Peter gave him the keys to a Cadillac. Third guy walks up to St. Peter and says, St. Peter, I'm the man. I was with my wife for some 25 years, and of those 25 years, I not cheated not one time. St. Peter gave him a high five and the keys to a brand new Bentley. Fast forward 2 weeks, the guy in the Pinto and the guy in the Cadillac are cruising the golden streets of heaven. They see the guy in the Bentley. He's crying. They walk up to him and they said, what's wrong? He said, guys, my wife passed, but she's in heaven. They said, well, that's great. He said, no, I'm driving a Bentley and she was on a skateboard. Some of y'all won't get that till tomorrow. Some of y'all won't get that till the day after tomorrow. And some of y'all won't ever get that. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome, welcome, welcome. We are so glad that you are here this afternoon. As stated, my name is Guy Lambert. I am a longtime D.C. resident and host of the Joe Claire Morning Show. You can also watch me on Fox 5. We have a show known here as Like It or Not, and that airs at 7 p.m. If you will take a look at the screen around you, ladies and gentlemen, you will see today's program, which includes remarks from members of Congress, HBCU presidents, and, of course, the annual State of the HBCU address from none other than Dr. Michael L. Lomax. Very quickly, if you haven't already done so, you're having problems logging on, I would be remiss if I didn't tell you how to do so. Obviously, go to the Wi-Fi on your phone. You can pull that out. Scroll down. I believe you'll see Marriott Conference. As HBCU champions, advocates, and partners. Please note that I believe this event right now is being streamed on UNCF Facebook. So if you're on social media, please post using the hashtag HBCU Strong and tag at UNCF. Now, it is my pleasure to introduce Dr. Cynthia Warwick, president of Stillman College. I got to tell you, I feel warm and fuzzy inside when I think about Stillman College. I attended the University of Alabama, right down the street from Stillman in Tuscaloosa, Alabama. Well, come Fridays, we all know it's fish day. Fish is a little different at the University of Alabama. We would sneak over to Stillman and have the real fish, if you know what I mean. A pharmacist and health services researcher, Dr. Warwick has some 20 years of higher education experience as a faculty and administrator. Recent executive leadership positions include interim president of Grambling State University and South Carolina State University. You see, Dr. Warwick began her academic career on the faculty right here at Howard University, as they say, the real HU. A native of San Antonio, Texas, Dr. Warwick received the BS in Pharmacy from Howard University, her Master's of Science in Public Policy from the Georgia Institute of Technology, and her PhD, ladies and gentlemen, in Environmental Science and Public Policy from George Mason University, based right over the bridge in Virginia. Her collaborative leadership style is focused on producing academic excellence, administrative accountability, biomedical research, and student success outcomes. Now, following Dr. Warwick's remarks, we will hear from Congresswoman Barbara Lee of California, who has served as an HBCU champion throughout her time in Congress and was, well, an integral part of making sure that HBCUs get their word out to Congress. We will also hear from Congressman Mark Walker of North Carolina, another HBCU champion. Now, without further ado, please put your hands together. You can start clapping. We're all family here. We're all friends. Please help me welcome Dr. Warwick. Pleasure to meet you, man. Nice to meet you.
Well, thanks, Guy, and I didn't know you had that history in Tuscaloosa, so it's nice to have someone who loves soul food, fried fish on Fridays, and we also do it broiled as well for our healthy initiatives. It's a pleasure to be here this afternoon as a president of a UNCF institution and an HBCU alumni. I'm excited and inspired by the continued work and ever-growing legacy of UNCF and HBCUs across the country. We are seeing a renewed interest and focus on our institutions in a way that we haven't seen in years. We always knew the value and importance of HBCUs, and I am heartened as more lawmakers, organizations, and individuals join the chorus of support for our institutions. UNCF has been integral in increasing support for HBCUs and educating the broader community about not just the history of our schools, but also their future and how we sustain them for our students and communities. Just last year, UNCF led the way in achieving the permanent extension of HBCU federal funding through passage of the Future Act. We thank all of our stakeholders who joined to support this successful initiative. UNCF could not do this work without the hard work and dedication of its member presidents, many of whom are in the audience today. I invite my colleagues to please stand and be recognized for their achievements and leadership thus far in their dedication to their students and communities. Our HBCU member presidents, please stand. Thank you. We are proud to serve our diverse population of students, the majority who are the first generation to attend college and hail from low-income and rural communities across America. We are excited to be a part of today's event as we celebrate new accomplishments and achievements and learn more about the challenges and opportunities facing HBCUs at this pivotal moment in our country. Thank you and welcome to the annual State of HBCUs.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, I was told that Congresswoman Lee has yet to arrive, so we will make sure we chit-chat with her once she does so. In the meantime, we are leading up to one of my favorite parts of the program, and that is when we can all sit down and break bread. Without further ado, I'd like to bring up Dr. Franklin Evans, president of Voorhees College in South Carolina. Dr. Evans?
Good afternoon. I know some of you have already started eating. There are heathens in the bunch. But I did pray for the table. Let us bow our heads, please. Father, we thank you for this day and this opportunity to assemble together. We thank you for UNCF and our historically black colleges and universities. We thank you for those that lead the institutions, those who are a part of the institution, and those who will be blessed by what those institutions do. Bless our gathering, bless our conversation, bless our institutions. Last but not least, please bless the food that we're about to partake that will be of nourishment to our bodies. We give you praise, we give you honor, and we give you glory. In Jesus' name, amen.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, please enjoy. In the meantime, we will be joined very briefly by none other than Dr. Walter Kimbrough momentarily. Please enjoy your lunch.
Ladies and gentlemen, we've been joined by a member of Congress representing the state of North Carolina. In addition to great service, he's one of the co-founders of the continuing HBCU fly-in that was hosted last week, and he helps to lead the bipartisan HBCU caucus. Of course, we know of the leadership of Congresswoman Alma Adams from North Carolina, but you should also know of the leadership of Congressman Mark Walker, who has helped to make HBCUs as bipartisan as anything else in the 116th Congress. We welcome him to our forefront. Please receive Congressman Mark Walker of North Carolina.
Thank you. What a distinct honor it is for me to be here today. We were looking at some of the notes. I think I'm the only House Republican to potentially make the president's list. I consider that a pretty high honor, so we're happy about it. So yes, my background, I was a pastor for 16 years, and we had a chance to begin to build some relationships. Some of you may know my wife is a two-time graduate from Winston-Salem State University. I get the chance to represent the A&T Aggies. So I won't get into all the Aggie pride stuff today because I don't want to tick anybody off, because I know not everybody's Aggies in the room. So, but yeah, it really is. As I was driving over here from the Capitol and thought about this huge honor, I thought about 10 years ago. I remember taking a group of about 65 or 70 people into Cleveland, Ohio. We were working to refurbish a middle school, actually an elementary school there in the inner city of Cleveland. And I remember working with, what all do you need us to bring? What can we bring? And I remember the organizers told me something that I've never forgotten. They said, we just want you to bring hope. And the way that impacted me with coming over today and getting a chance to be with all of you folks, it gives me hope that we can still work together on some of these issues for the betterment of our country and for the betterment of these causes. And I appreciate the UNCF and all that you do in the forefront. I was very happy. Alma Adams and I, we came into Congress together, and we've been able to work together. The Future Act, we were so excited. That's now permanently authorized, going to the future there, so we're excited about that. She and I also had the privilege of, and some of your students have received this, you know, sometimes, as you can realize, D.C. is not the cheapest place to live in the world. So she and I came together and they said, what if we could launch paid internships? So this will be our third year that we will have one of your students in our office that's receiving a paid internship that can be able to help them with some of their financial surroundings that you have here in D.C. I know you've gotten much on your program today, but I want to make sure, as I sit here and try to think how much I want to articulate this. I've been in Congress for 5 or 6 years. I'm number 4 in the House as vice chair. I've had a chance to lead the largest caucus in Congress. But when I leave, I want you to know how much this means to me as far as hopefully showing that you can come to Congress and you can still have an R by your name, but you can find a way to impact the communities that you represent in hopefully a very successful way. I don't take this lightly. My family, my wife benefited from the good work of HBCUs. She run the Level 1 Trauma Center, and for many years flew on the Wake Forest Baptist University Medical Center's helicopter. She led that effort as well, and she was able to do it because of a dang good education she got at Winston-Salem State University. God bless you. Thanks for letting me come out today and spend a few minutes with you. Very much appreciate it. Thank you so much. Thank you. Thank you.
Congressman Walker, on behalf of UNCF, we want to present you with our HBCU Champion Award and thank you for your leadership with the Future Act. And we're going to ask the HBCU presidents that are here from the state of North Carolina to please join us for a picture.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, if I could have your attention again, please. One more time, if I can have your attention. As you continue to dine at this time, I'd like to introduce you to Walter Kimbrough. Of course, Dr. Kimbrough, as I like to call him, or as he's known, is currently the president of Dillard University, based in New Orleans, Louisiana. At this time, Dr. Kimbrough, please make your way to the podium.
Nice to meet you, sir. Good afternoon. I know y'all eating, but good afternoon. Thank you. The UNCF has had a long-standing tagline, "A mind is a terrible thing to waste." Several years ago, we refreshed it to add, "but a wonderful thing to invest in." A series of ads and commercials featured students who at some point would end the conversation by proclaiming, "I am your dividend." While he was never featured in the commercials, Dr. Michael Lomax is probably one of the best examples of a UNCF dividend. He graduated Phi Beta Kappa from Morehouse College, received an MA degree from Columbia University and a PhD in American and African American literature from Emory University. He taught literature at Morehouse and Spelman colleges and the University of Georgia. As someone who grew up in Atlanta, I always knew of Dr. Michael Lomax as he pursued simultaneous full-time careers as a university professor and public servant. He began his public service as an assistant to Maynard Jackson, Atlanta's first African-American mayor and another UNCF dividend, and went on to serve as the first head of Atlanta's Bureau of Cultural Affairs. In 1978, he was elected to the Fulton County Board of Commissioners. 2 years later, he became the board's chairman, the first African-American to ever hold that position, serving for 12 years and helping to bring the 1988 Democratic National Convention and the 1996 Olympic Games to Atlanta. After 20 years in Atlanta, Dr. Lomax became the 5th president of Dillard University in New Orleans, where he served for 7 years. During his presidency, Dillard moved up into the top tier of comprehensive colleges ranked by U.S. News and World Report and increased its enrollment by nearly 70%, doubled its assets, tripled its annual philanthropic revenues, and undertook and completed a major campus construction and modernization program. In 2004, he became the president and CEO of UNCF. As a former president, Dr. Lomax has used his insight and experience to shepherd UNCF for more than 15 years to increase support for our institutions and our students. Under his leadership, UNCF has raised more than $3 billion and helped more than 110,000 students earn college degrees and launch careers. Today, UNCF supports more than 60,000 students at more than 1,100 colleges and universities across the country, especially those attending its 37-member historically black colleges and universities. Dr. Lomax oversees the organization's 400 scholarship programs, which award over 10,000 scholarships a year. He also launched the UNCF Institute for Capacity Building, which helps UNCF's member institutions become stronger, more effective, and more self-sustaining. During his tenure, Dr. Lomax and UNCF have fought for educational opportunity and access and the preservation and strengthening of HBCUs. He and his team ensure that the narrative about our schools focuses on our history, legacy, and vitality, and that the essential role of HBCUs in creating and fostering racial equity isn't forgotten or diminished. He also continues to expand the role and reach of UNCF, showing firsthand how innovation is necessary to push an organization forward and increase its impact. Finally, Dr. Lomax tells a story of offering me a job in student affairs at Dillard in 1999, which is true, but I didn't want his job as he claims. But Having a chance to visit with him and being on campus, I did see Dillard as a place I would be interested in leading someday. And because I became president of Philander Smith in 2004, the year he began at UNCF, our working together was simply delayed. He has provided me with a supportive mentoring relationship that I value immensely. As a professor and politician, scholar and servant, Dr. Lomax has been the perfect messenger to remind the nation that a mind is a terrible thing to waste and a wonderful thing to invest in. Please welcome your dividend, Dr. Michael Lomax.
Come on, you can do better than that for Dr. Kimbrough. Give him a bigger hand, come on. And Dr. Warwick, give her a big hand. Come on, I want to hear some more. And Guy Lambert, give him a hand, come on. He got a lot of energy. Now, I want to thank Walter for that really generous and special introduction. I've known the Kimbrough family for a very long time. From my kitchen window, look down at the Cascade United Methodist Church, where Walter Kimbrough Sr. was the iconic pastor. And this is a family that has had deep roots in Atlanta, but also deep roots in HBCUs. His dad, graduate of Morris Brown College. And another dividend. And it's great to be on a program with two dividends, Dr. Warwick and Dr. Kimbrough, and to be with so many dividends in the room. How many people here today are graduates of HBCUs or recipients? No, you got to stand up. We've got to stand up and show yourself. We got a lot of them in here, but they don't want to stand up. Okay, all right. But a lot of folks in here who are graduates, but also we have a lot of supporters here and partners who are involved with other minority-serving institutions, and I'm going to say a lot about our partnership with them. So I'd like our friends who represent other minority-serving institutions to also wave your hands, and let's just give them a big hand because they are our partners as well. So this is our second annual State of HBCUs event, and it is a good time to take stock of what has happened since we met a year ago. At most State of the State addresses and at some of the State of the Union speeches, the governor or the president declares that the state of the union is strong. Now, certainly there is a lot to celebrate from last year, and believe me, we are going to celebrate the honor roll today of those who did so much, like Congressman Mark Walker, to ensure that HBCUs continue to thrive. But I cannot stand before you here today and say only that the state of HBCUs is strong, or only that HBCUs remain resilient. As you know, those truths are only part of the story. The other part of the story is the unmet needs of HBCUs and their students' needs that remain so very, very urgent. And so I want to talk to you today about what I will call the HBCU paradox. It is my hope, it is UNCF's hope, that a year from now, when we meet again here in Washington, D.C., we will have taken giant stride to end the HBCU paradox and secure the transformational support that HBCUs have long deserved and too long gone without. So, what is an HBCU paradox, Dr. Ardis? You're about to find out. It is a label for a phenomenon that everyone in this room will find familiar. On the one hand, we know that HBCUs are among the few institutions in America that enjoy consistent bipartisan support. Presidents, senators, members of Congress, clergy, news commentators, actors, artists, athletes, you name it. The gamut of American society hails HBCUs and the roles that they have played in the history of our nation. And yet, here is the paradox. Despite all of the bipartisan support, HBCUs have always been woefully underfunded throughout their nearly 2 centuries of history. And in 2020, we are still badly underfunded, despite the very real victories we won in Congress last year, with the bipartisan support of many of the people both here in this room and on our honor roll today. The HBCU paradox has some pernicious consequences. Too often, it creates an all too convenient gap between rhetoric and reality. It makes it easy for people to look and sound like they are HBCU boosters without having to take the hard steps and make deep-seated commitment to eradicating decades of disparate treatment of HBCUs. So I want to talk for a few minutes about first why I think the HBCU paradox has persisted for so long, and second, why I think there are reasons for optimism that its days are numbered. Now, as to why this phenomenon has persisted for so long, I would give 2 reasons for this paradoxical attitude of government, corporations, and philanthropy toward HBCUs. Certainly, few doubt that HBCUs enjoy and deserve bipartisan support. But unfortunately, as we have learned from hard experience, that support too often is a mile wide and an inch deep. Few lawmakers and policymakers publicly criticize HBCUs and their historic role in educating Black Americans. A lawmaker has very little to gain from criticizing a historically Black college or university, particularly a college in their own district. Yet too few lawmakers and too few policymakers step up to battle for hundreds of millions of dollars. Yes, hundreds of millions of dollars of new funding for HBCUs outside their home districts and elevate HBCUs to their very top priorities. Now, we're just a couple of weeks off from the start of March Madness. And that annual state of hysteria demonstrates what it's like when people in America are emotionally engaged. For one shining moment last year, HBCUs were a national focus. HBCUs and MSIs here in Washington, D.C. They were a top priority. I'm referring, of course, to the passage of the Future Act, finally in December. That new law provides $255 million in continued funding to boost science, technology, engineering, and math, STEM opportunities at a variety of minority-serving institutions. And $85 million of that funding will go to historically Black colleges and universities in perpetuity. The passage of the Future Act was absolutely vital to HBCUs, and it was a critical moment, a commitment by Congress to the role of HBCUs and minority-serving institutions play in enhancing STEM opportunities and outcomes for minority students. And I cannot overstate the consequences of not continuing that funding. HBCUs produce what? 17% of all college graduates, but a quarter of all STEM graduates. Why? Because of additional funding. That funding was eliminated from September 30th until that bill passed in December. That triumph could not have been achieved without the support of many lawmakers who are going to be recognized here and over the next several days, and who are members now of our honor roll, as Mark Walker was just recognized as being. Those Congresspeople and senators are male and female, black and white and Asian and Latino, and yes, Christian, Jew, Muslim, and Republicans and Democrats. A Republican president signed the bill into law. Now, I want to be clear about this. We are deeply grateful for their support. And so are the hundreds of thousands of students at our institutions and the millions of students at all of the other institutions touched by the Future Act. Think of the thousands of students whose lives will be changed for the better by the Future Act because they got to explore opportunities in STEM that otherwise they might never have had. But as appreciative and grateful as UNCF is of their efforts, the passage of the Future Act also raises an obvious question. Why did it take so long to pass the Future Act? And more important, why isn't there more legislation like it being passed into law? For a number of years, UNCF has called for transformational investments in HBCUs and student aid programs to close equity and opportunity gaps for students of color and all low-income students across our nation. When we talk about doing something for students of color, we're not talking about just doing it for students of color. When we touch a student of color, we are touching all of the low-income students across this country. We have made the case for a $1 billion grant investment in the infrastructure of HBCU campuses so they can fairly compete in the 21st century economy. We have called for doubling the amount of Pell Grant awards so that these scholarships, these American scholarships, once again cover the bulk of tuition, as they did for an earlier generation of American students, including those at historically black colleges and universities. Give us a hand. That is an applause line. Yes. And let me say this. Presidential campaign after presidential campaign has since called for the doubling of Pell. However, we said it first here last year. Happily, they heard us. We are glad to lead the education sector on this recommendation because we know the powerful impact that doubling Pell would have on HBCUs and our student population and all the Pell-eligible students across this country. The Pell Grant is America's scholarship, and it is for the students who need it the most, and we need to treat it as the #1 priority for our nation's higher education strategy to close the race and class inequity gap. Applause. Line. So, You got to wake up. So, yes, the Future Act is vital, but it cannot become a one-off accomplishment on which to rest laurels. The passage of the Future Act should not be an exception, ladies and gentlemen. It should be the norm for a Congress committed to making investments to close today's equity and opportunity gaps. Congress doubled the National Institute of Health's total funding, not once, but twice in less than 20 years. Congress can and should do the same to address longstanding underfunding for HBCUs and students of color and all low-income college goers. We can start, I'm coming up on another applause line, we can start by doubling the Pell Grant and tripling Title III. That's an applause line. Now, in addition to the widespread but sometimes shallow support for HBCUs, I would suggest that there is a second reason for the persistence of the HBCU paradox. Everyone here today would readily acknowledge that outright racial discrimination and the forces of Jim Crow segregation that HBCUs too long confronted, that they have faded, if not entirely disappeared. But at the same time, we also know that the gap between public rhetoric and daily reality on HBCUs persists because subtler forms of disparate and unfair treatment of HBCUs by government, by corporations, by philanthropists, by lenders, and accreditors, they still continue. Yes, that is an applause line. Just within the last month, we have seen two glaring examples of disparate treatment of HBCUs. Some of you may have seen the devastating study by the Student Borrower Protection Center on educational redlining. Educational redlining. That study found that if you took two identical applicants and had them apply to refinance a $30,000 student loan, the terms of the loan differed dramatically based solely on whether the applicant graduated from an historically black college or university, an HBCU, or from a non-minority serving institution. Read for that, a predominantly white institution. Flagrant. In their study of lending practices, both hypothetical graduates were 24 years old. Residents of New York City, Dr. Smothers, had been employed by their current employer for 5 months, earned $50,000 a year as a salaried analyst, and had a $5,000 savings. The only difference between the two loan applicants is that one graduated from Howard University and the other graduated from New York University. Now, consider this. The Howard graduate, and Howard is known as a jewel and capstone of the HBCU system. That was not an applause line. Now consider this. The Howard graduate still suffered from what the study called, and I quote, the HBCU penalty. We got a penalty in this paradox. Just as telling, this audit of lending practices was able to achieve a very rare feat. It not only brought to light disparate lending practices, but was also able to actually quantify the amount of the HBCU penalty. Compared to an identical NYU graduate, Dr. Campbell, compared, you're about to hear it, it turns out that the Howard graduate was charged $3,500 more to repay their loan and about $725 more just in origination fees. That is a shameful example of the disparate treatment of HBCU graduates. Our graduates are being punished for nothing more than the fact that they graduated from an HBCU and not from a predominantly white institution in 2020. Now, there was another story last month that highlighted the inequitable treatment of HBCUs in the case of philanthropic organizations. I am referring to a story that ran on National Public Radio under the headline, "Largest Gift in Howard University History Sparks Conversation about HBCU Donations." Think about that for a moment. Why would the largest gift in the history of Howard University, quote, spark conversations about HBCUs? The answer, I think, is known by everybody in this room. Because as wonderful as my friends, Bruce and Martha Karsh and their Karsh Family Foundation's $10 million donation to Howard was, and it was wonderful, generous, and as invaluable as it will be to strengthening Howard's STEM program, $10 million is still a modest fraction of the major gifts that go to non-minority serving state schools and selected private universities on a regular and routine basis. But it sparks conversation when it's an HBCU. As the NPR story noted, the University of Maryland at College Park received a $219 million gift in the last decade, sparking no conversation in the PWI community. Nearby Georgetown University received a gift of $100 million, sparking no conversation in the PWI community. The University of Oregon received $500 million to build a STEM-focused campus in Eugene, sparking some conversation in the HBCU community. SUNY Binghamton just received a $60 million gift to build what? A baseball stadium, sparking no conversation other than just now. I ask again, why can't the Karsh Family's Foundation gift to Howard be the norm instead of a lonely exception? I know that my friends, Bruce and Martha Karsh, see their HBCU gift as a beginning for them. A beginning. They've given to one other HBCU, Spelman College. They've now given to Howard. They plan to give more gifts. It is not for them a one-off. And they also want their gift to inspire others like them, their friends, their colleagues, their neighbors, to invest in HBCUs, which they understand make an extraordinary contribution to American higher education. They don't want theirs to be the largest gift ever made to Howard. They want other philanthropists to step up, join in supporting America's HBCUs and our students. And yes, unfortunately, once again, the HBCU penalty, HBCU disparity in philanthropic support and government support can be quantified. The Institute for Higher Education Policy has calculated that minority-serving four-year institutions receive annually about $865 per student in private gifts and investment return. By contrast, non-minority serving institutions receive nearly eight times as much per student in private gifts and investment return, or just under $6,600 per student per year. Inequity, injustice. The disparate treatment of HBCUs by philanthropy similarly echoes throughout the hallways and offices of federal agencies in Washington, D.C. It is true that all colleges and universities experienced a decline in federal funding per student between 2003 and 2015. But as a joint study by the United Negro College Fund, Frederick D. Patterson Research Institute, and ACE found last year, for most institutions, the decline in federal support was relatively modest, amounting to a few $100s per student. Not so for private HBCUs. Private HBCUs and private HBCUs alone have experienced a devastating decline in federal support. In 2003, federal funding per full-time student at private HBCUs came to $4,300 per student per year. By 2015, federal funding had plummeted to $2,500, a drop of 42%. Now, thanks to Congress, and thanks to our work with our honor roll, we have made gains starting in 2017. But no one should be surprised that an uneven playing field yields underfunded colleges. Why have federal agencies been starving private HBCUs? Wouldn't that have been a good question to ask all of those candidates who showed up on your campuses and told you how much they were going to do because they believe so deeply in HBCUs? Now, virtually everybody acknowledges that HBCUs have historically been underfunded. But it would surprise many Americans outside of this room to learn that HBCUs continue to be inequitably funded by government and philanthropy today, and continue to face discrimination by lenders. Moreover, I would argue again that this year, as I did last year, that some regional accreditors continue to treat HBCUs far more harshly than other institutions. It is telling that after last year's college admissions scandal led to an FBI investigation, prosecutions, arrests, and jail sentences that sent people to jail, not a single regional accreditor opened an investigation into institutional integrity at universities where rich parents cheated and bribed university officials to get their kids, to give their kids an entitlement, a boost, a privilege. Not one accreditor. You didn't hear a peep from regional accreditors. Not a peep. But some of those same accreditors have levied stiff sanctions and put HBCUs on probation for less serious offenses under the integrity line, and even done so just on the basis of a news story in a newspaper. No applause, just aghast. What is that? It is disparate punishment. It is disparate treatment. It is the HBCU penalty within the HBCU paradox. It's the reality these college presidents live with every day. Now, James Baldwin once observed about history that, and I quote, "The past is all that makes the present coherent." The past is all that makes the present coherent. When we look at the unfair and disparate treatment of HBCUs today, we see how painfully right, as usual, James Baldwin was. Only our history, a history of past unfairness, discrimination, disparity, can explain what we continue to see visited upon HBCUs today. Past is prologue. Now, the facts I've outlined about the HBCU paradox, the sometimes superficial commitment to HBCUs, the disparate treatment of HBCUs, won't come as a surprise to those of you in this room who lead HBCUs every day. But don't be fooled. Those facts would come as a surprise to many Americans, and even to some lawmakers. Unfortunately, the public narrative today about HBCUs is often quite different than the facts I've just outlined. As Congresswoman Alma Adams put it so well just last year, we are fed up with people asking, do we still need black colleges? Too often, that tired and dispiriting and corrosive narrative embodied in that question is another way of suggesting what's really in that question, which is HBCUs shouldn't be here any longer. And it is not about the need to seriously invest in HBCUs to correct historic and persistent inequality. It doesn't help, frankly, when those in power say that HBCUs were, quote, and I quote, going out and we saved them, end quote. Now, we appreciate that President Trump has signed legislation that was not included in his own budgets, like the Future Act and a boost in the amount of Title III and Pell Grant awards. We appreciate that the administration supported loan forgiveness for HBCUs affected by Hurricane Katrina and the restoration of summer Pell Grants, and the new deferment at HBCU Capital Finance. Good job, Mr. President. At the same time, however, we have also objected to the administration's efforts to eliminate supplemental equal opportunity grants and slash the federal work-study program and TRIO. Those programs help our students access college and stay in school. And we are thankful that Congress has not only maintained, but in many cases, strengthened those very same programs. With all that said, and with all due respect to the President, it bears emphasizing that HBCUs did not need to be, quote, saved. And we weren't going out of business. Rumors of the demise of HBCUs are not only greatly exaggerated, but they are false. And we, UNCF, will fight to ensure that they do not become self-fulfilling prophecies. The truth is that the latest data show that HBCUs, like those that you lead in this room today, and colleagues around the country, unlike many segments of higher education, HBCUs saw enrollment rise by nearly 2% in 2017. In fact, during the past 3 years, roughly 1 out of 3 HBCUs have record enrollments. Those are the achievements we celebrate, and let me tell you, right here and now, we are not prepared to close a single HBCU. We're going to fight for every one of them. So, how can we replace a false narrative with a genuine storyline about HBCUs? We are educators, and a key part of our mission is to teach the public, to both celebrate our success and to speak to the real needs of HBCUs if we are to succeed in closing opportunity gaps and succeed in making HBCUs stronger. No one knows the story of HBCUs better than all of you here in this room. That story is of the students whose lives you have changed. Those stories have the power to dispel the myths and open eyes for the millions of Americans who have never been to an HBCU. I'm not sure it can do much for those who write about HBCUs and still have never been to an HBCU, because they got a good hustle going and they may not want to experience the truth. But if they did, they would see firsthand what Dr. Warwick does every day, what Dr. Kimbrough does every day, what all of these college presidents do every day. You'd see the carefully tailored care, the support and instruction that HBCUs provide, or the anchor that these HBCUs form in the communities where they are located. They would know the economic impact, the jobs that these institutions create in those communities. We cannot stop educating the public until every young black boy and girl has the same chance to pursue their dream as you and I did, at a place that nurtures, welcomes, and urgently wants them to be there and to succeed. And as we pursue that mission, I see more than a glimmer of hope for the first time in a long time. Even more reasons for optimism. The tide of public opinion at the voting booth and in Congress is shifting and finally beginning to acknowledge the need for sweeping investment in HBCUs. It is striking that nearly every presidential Democratic candidate today has an HBCU platform. And in most cases, their proposals are far more sweeping than in the past. Vice President Biden has pledged to invest $70 billion in HBCUs and other minority-serving institutions. Senator Warren has pledged $50 billion investment. Senator Sanders has promised to make all HBCUs tuition-free and invest $15 billion in infrastructure and training programs. Mayor Bloomberg has a comprehensive plan that rewards HBCUs for doing what they do best, educating those from underserved backgrounds. So far, we have yet to see those kinds of commitments from the Trump campaign or in the president's 2021 budget. But we know the president wants the bragging rights for having done more than any other president to support HBCUs. So, there is still time for you, President Trump, to claim that mantle. We hope in the coming months you will propose investments in HBCUs that rival or exceed those of your Democratic opponents. So I will close by saying that the state of HBCUs is stronger. It is stronger today, but it could and should be even stronger. Let us make this year the year that we start to end the HBCU paradox, eliminate the HBCU penalty, and match rhetoric with reality. Let's make this year the year when inequitable treatment of HBCUs is named and shamed. Let's make this year the year where false narratives about HBCUs wither and die. And let's make this year the year when Congress and the American people begin to truly commit to investing in HBCUs to end our nation's equity and opportunity gaps. We thank all of the lawmakers on our HBCU honor roll and HBCU presidents and advocates here today who are bringing us a step closer to fulfilling that mission. And we reaffirm our motto that a mind is a terrible thing to waste, but a wonderful thing to invest in. Let this year be the year when America joins us in making that investment. Thank you.
Let's give Dr. Lomax another hand for the State HBCU address. Good afternoon. My name is Rodriguez Murray. I serve as the Senior Vice President for Public Policy and Government Affairs at UNCF. I'm delighted to be with all of you today. I want to call your attention to the palm card that was placed at all of your seats. This is your avenue to the HBCU Congressional Honor Roll. Now, we've seen a number of increases in items that Dr. Lomax has mentioned. They include, over the last few years, UNCF and others have worked with Congress to increase HBCU congressional spending by nearly $200 million, to increase the Pell Grant and SCOG. We've worked with them to pass comprehensive criminal justice reform. We worked with them to bring back the Future Act and extend Title III mandatory money. And we've secured a deferment of federal loans for 12 of the schools in the room today, but 13 private HBCUs. How did we do that? We worked with members of Congress in an extremely bipartisan manner to accomplish those goals and more. And you can just hover your phone's camera here over the scan, and the HBCU honor roll for 2020 will come up. You'll be able to see last year's honor roll as well as this year's honor roll. And we're going to see, for the presidents in the room, we're going to go visit a number of them this afternoon and Thursday in the morning. And we're going to hand out awards, and we're going to make sure they understand what we're asking for this year. Because UNCF firmly believes that if you're not seated at the table, then you're going to be on the menu. And we intend to be seated at the table. Now, I'm going to ask my colleagues, Philip and Jonah, to come on up. We want to place the chairs, and we're going to prepare for a panel discussion. We're going to re-invite our MC, Guy Lambert, to the front in just a moment. And this is going to be a treat. We worked with all of the heads of the major minority education groups to accomplish the Future Act. And so this year, we invited all of their chief executive officers to be with us and have a quick panel discussion on what we learned from working together, because when you're successful, you want to talk about the fact that you work together. And we're glad to have had this outcome. We're also going to remove this right here. Second one also, if that's okay. I'm going to bring back our MC, Mr. Lambert, and he's going to introduce the CEOs of the several minority education organizations. Let's clap our hands again for Mr. Lambert.
The applause truly goes to none other than Dr. Lomax. Ladies and gentlemen, you heard the message. You heard what the UNCF is all about. Of course, there was a plethora of information that was shared. And, well, as Dr. Lomax said, we will now continue the conversation. We will spark the conversation in a rather unique way. At this time, I'd like to introduce to you our esteemed panel for today. Of course, I'd like to bring back none other than Dr. Michael Lomax, of course, the President and CEO of UNCF. Please make your way up, sir. None other than Dr. Antonio Flores, Haku. Please make your way up. Dr. Harry Williams, none other than the Thurgood Marshall College Fund. Ms. Leslie Bakersville from NAFIO. I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly. I stand corrected, I'm sorry? Baskerville. I apologize. Carrie Billy, please. Please make your way. Ahek, I believe. And Rita Penn Ahrens. I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly. If not, I will high five going out to me. Of course, she represents OCA Asian Pacific American Advocates. As we wait for our entire panel to make their way to the area, once again, I would encourage you to hop on social media. A lot of us new to this, and myself included. Once again, the hashtag HBCU Strong. If you happen to tag anyone today, please make sure it is UNCF. You heard Dr. Lomax, ladies and gentlemen. We talked about the Future Act. For those of you who don't know, the fostering undergraduate talent by unlocking resources for education. It's a mouthful. It's a lot to think about, but it's something that's very important. As you heard Dr. Lomax mention, the Future Act was the result of an incredible effort by all of these folks' organizations. I'm going to pass the microphone down, and as we do that, I would ask that each of you please answer the question as we begin our survey and panel.
What was the question?
What's the question?
We missed the question.
I got to pass the mic down. Oh, okay. All right. Could we have this microphone turned on, please? There we go. You know, ladies and gentlemen, you're looking at the bread and butter, if you will, right here in front of you. You see, without these folks, the Future Act would not have happened. The question to you, ladies and gentlemen, is the Future Act was a result of the incredible efforts by all of your organizations. How will this coalition, the one that's sitting and standing right in front of me, work together in order to make this happen?
How will we?
That's correct. Work together.
Oh, well, how will we work together for the future? Well, you know, I want to just say that I worked on K-12 education beforehand. And I was actually, I did work on passing ESSA. And it was done in coalition with other communities and advocates of color. And so this is nothing new for the API community to do. I think we know that if we band together, we have an understanding of what it is that our communities and our students need, that they will listen to us. So I think for us, OCA certainly intends on working with the other advocates here on the reauthorization of the Higher Education Act and on other education issues moving forward.
Prior to passing that down, I've been informed that your lapel mics are now on, so you no longer need the microphone. You can just speak accordingly.
Thank you. First, I want to thank Dr. Lomax for inviting us to come together here at this forum and for his leadership in promoting the passage of the Future Act. Of course, all of our colleagues here at the forum had different roles to play, and we all contributed to the passage of the act. But as Dr. Lomax was sharing with us his state of HBCUs, it became apparent to me that obviously we have somewhat different histories as communities of color. But all those histories have one common denominator, and that's oppression. And so while we all have somewhat different histories, the one thing that we also have in common is our future in this country. And I think it's so, no pun intended, so appropriate, the Future Act, to be called such, because that's what we have in front of us. And that, I think, understanding those realities help us all to come together and make it happen. And of course, December 10th, I remember vividly, that morning we had a press conference at the Capitol with members of Congress and many who supported the effort. That afternoon, the House passed the bill. And later in the evening, the same day, the Senate followed suit. So that was the swiftest passage of a bill that I have witnessed in my 21 years of work on advocacy for HAKU. And I think is a testament to the power of collective efforts that our organizations represent. And it did work very, very well, and it will work again very, very well if we continue to work together. And so that's how I see the evolution of our joint effort. And in fact, it reminds me that we as an association, the Hispanic Association of College and Universities, have already introduced a bill spearheaded by Congressman Castro and about 40 co-sponsors from both sides of the aisle that I hope the other associations represented here can take a look at and join us so that all MSIs are part of that bill, not just HSIs. Yeah. Because it is about bringing together our colleges and universities to reach out to K-12 districts that have the vast majority of minority students enrolled, to make sure that they succeed in not just getting the high school diploma, but being ready for college success. And that bill is called the HERE Act. And I will send a formal invite to each of my colleagues here at the forum, but it's basically inspired by what I felt and saw happen through this effort with the Future Act.
I'll take the mic. Dr. Williams.
Okay, testing. Can you hear me? Yes. Good. First of all, I want to say thank you to Dr. Lomax for inviting us to come together as a group to talk about something that we all worked on. And it was a team effort, clearly a team effort, and I was so excited about the partnership. Whenever you do something that's really big and that's going to benefit a lot of people, you need to be engaged. And when this first started, Michael and I had a very candid conversation about how we're going to work together. and how our teams will work together to make this thing happen. Even when we felt, and there was times during this process, that it got really ugly, meaning that when it passed in the House and it went over to the Senate, and then Senator Lamar Alexander started playing with it. And that created some anxiety, but we held firm. Our government relations office worked together hand in hand, and we were very clear on our phone calls that we were not going to back down in terms of what they were trying to get us to do. They were trying to get us to settle for something that was not good. We initially went in and asked for 2 years, and the word from the House is that they weren't going to do a piecemeal bill because it was all about the reauthorization of higher education, and they didn't want to do something that would show a piecemeal effect. And Bobby Scott was very, very, very committed to trying to get something done for us. So when it came out of the House and it went over to the Senate side, we all had to really dig down and go to our different constituents and put the pressure on. And we had a press conference up on the Hill. We had the senators on both sides coming and advocating for it. So it was that type of intensity that kept the focus of this. And I had people to tell me it was dead. It was dead. There was no need to continue this journey. We've been here before. They're not going to pass anything that's going to support HBCUs. When the deadline passed, and Lamar Alexander's team, they kept talking and said, well, it's really not a deadline. And we've been told all along, you got a deadline, it's a deadline. But when that deadline passed and it said we're not going to renew this specific funding, we didn't give up on that process. And it was something that I thought was very, very powerful as a team. And then more specifically, when we started looking at how it was going to benefit our schools and increase the number of students supporting them in STEM, supporting our faculty and supporting our staff, we just kept that pressure going. So I'm very, very pleased. And I think this is just the beginning of partnerships that you will see. More specifically, you will see with UNCF and TMCF, to be clear, in terms of our partnership together, because we're all in this business as one. We're all focused on doing things right for our schools. And I think our corporate partners appreciate this, because when they support us, they're not only supporting just one entity, they're supporting all of us. And they're supporting all students who come from underserved communities. And that's what we represent up here as a team. So I think that this power, seeing this group collectively, is sending a strong message to a lot of people in this country, and I believe we're going to continue that journey.
I thought you were going to make an announcement there.
Well, I'll hold off.
I'll hold on, okay.
Okay.
But what I would say, and I want to underscore what my friend Harry has just said, you're going to see more work done jointly by our two organizations. And why should we compete when working as collaborators and partners will produce even bigger returns for the constituents that we serve? You know, there was a lot that happened behind the scenes, as Harry and my other colleagues are noting on the Future Act. But for me, the question was, could we get it through the House? Was always, could we get it through the House? And that's when it just became absolutely clear that to get it through the House, we had to get it through the House, we had to get it passed, we had to get the minorities in the House, the Republicans in the House, to join in, and they could not object. Right. And if we had just talked about HBCUs, we would not have achieved that goal. But when you brought Hispanic serving institutions into that mix, and you wanted to get the leader of the Republicans in the House from Southern California, you were suddenly talking about the fastest growing set of institutions in his district. And you saw that suddenly there was a calculus that changed completely when you brought all of us together that didn't exist when you were only talking about one group. And suddenly meetings that you couldn't have with the leader of the House, with Leader McCarthy, you could now have, because you were talking about his district and his state And so I think that for all of us, this has been a powerful reminder that individually, we are not as strong as we are collectively. And so we just have to, a pause line, we just have to continue to recognize that. And if we do that together, I believe you'll see us continuing to have successes and leading in getting more resources for the fastest growing set of institutions in the country, and that is minority serving institutions.
Great, thank you. Well, I also want to say thank you for inviting us to be here. It's really exciting and empowering to be here, but I'd like to just take a second before I mention where I think we could work together, which you've already laid out for us, but to acknowledge the first people of this land, the Algonquin and Piscataway people who lived, worked, loved, hoped in this place. And also the people who were brought to this place, their brothers and sisters who were brought against their will to build this city. And I hope that our work that we're doing here today and that we will do together in the future honors their legacy and their wildest dreams.
All right.
So I think, speaking of wildest dreams, one of the things that we all should commit to do, and we will, AHEC, which we are the tribal colleges, is to a couple of issues, that rhetoric to reality that really resonates with us. When we are not telling our story, when there is silence, in that vacuum, that's where the misconceptions, the stereotypes, the mascots, all of that stuff is created. So as Dr. Lomax said, you presidents, you and your students are your best storytellers. We as American Indians are storytellers. So let's get together and tell our stories and move that rhetoric to reality. The other thing is the hope for students. And that hope in financial resources, the lack of financial resources is our number one issue with our students, I'm sure with most of our students. So doubling the Pell Grant is an excellent way to just take that burden off their backs. So let's do that. Let's commit to really working to something bold. Instead of these little $20, $30 increases in Pell, let's go for doubling the Pell Grant.
All right.
So. Also, infrastructure, we all have infrastructure challenges. We could go on, but let's start with things that we could all agree on and find that commonality and keep moving forward. Thank you.
Thank you.
My name is Arthur Edward Thomas. I'm not Leslie Baskerville. Leslie Baskerville possesses the brilliance of Barbara Jordan and Phyllis Wheatley, the courage of Harriet Tubman, Sojourner Truth, Fannie Lou Hamer, and my mama, because she was bad too. And the beauty of Beyonce and Lena Horne.
All right.
So give President Esquire Baskerville a hand in her absence. Now, I'm the former president of Central State University. I'm the former chairman of the board of the National Association for Equal Opportunity in Higher Education. I was mentored by Jesse Jackson and Otis Moss and Stokely Carmichael and H. Rap Brown. And I'm proud of that. What President Baskerville told me to communicate to you, that in these words, I got an F and a D in Latin at Shoemaker Junior High School from a little racist white boy. But I always remember one phrase, repetitio est mater studiorum. Repetition is the mother of study. If you say something over and over and over again, and if you do something over and over again, then you will succeed. So President Baskerville wants you to know that she went every place and she did everything to get the letters and to get the support and to get the Congress people to answer their phones, to make it known how important this deal would be. We didn't eliminate anybody. If a Ku Klux Klansman wanted to send a letter, we say, come on. We got the conservatives. We got the borderline racists. We got the conservative black folks. We even got the black Anglo-Saxons. We got everybody. And they signed and they supported. And that's what she wanted you to know. She wanted you to know that this was a marvelous consortium that we have here. And this consortium will work together on many, many other things. Because we got the future in STEM, but we don't have the future in not going to jail. We got the future in STEM, but we don't have the future on black babies dying earlier than white babies. We got the future in STEM, but black folks still pay more for their houses than white babies or people. We got the future in STEM, but we still even pay more for a car than white folks pay for their cars. We got the future in STEM, but we still die from cancer and heart trouble and diabetes earlier than white folks do. So this is one STEM, but we got to get about 1 million more STEMs. That's what she told me to tell you. All right.
And with that, ladies and gentlemen, I think when it comes to each and every one of our panel members, in the word of Beyonce, you must not know about me. And if you don't like what they said, you can stand to the left, to the left. As we wrap up, ladies and gentlemen, we have to make our way to Capitol Hill. At this time, I would ask that you please provide us with closing remarks. Please keep it to about 45 seconds or so. We are running slightly behind. So at this time, any one of you would please, if you would begin with your closing remarks.
Well, I just want to, again, underline the importance of working together. And I mentioned a bill is 3827, HR 3827. You want to check it out. It's about promoting collaboration between Minority 7 institutions and school districts that enroll the vast majority of students of color, because we know that those districts are severely under-resourced, and they not always have the faculty they need to teach the advanced courses and their college preparation that they need. So I invite you to join us, and I will send a formal invite to our CEOs of the various organizations to modify that and move on together.
Dr. Williams, did you want to make mention of something else with regard to an announcement today? Very good, sir. Dr. Lomax?
I'm done.
And we can continue, ma'am.
I'll just say that, just to remember that together, we are actually the largest group of institutions of higher education in this country. So we should be able to get done whatever we set our minds to. So I'm really happy to be part of that group. Thank you.
Very good.
I would just say, one man or one woman with courage is a majority. I know we're catching hell now, but I would just say there is a God who rules above with a hand of power and a heart of love. And if we're right, he'll fight our battle and give us the victory to be won. Finally, a lot of y'all don't know anything about this, but I'm a Kappa. And we say it's when things seem worse that you must not quit.
And with that, God is good. And all the time, God is good. Ma'am, would you like to add something prior to us wrapping up?
Sure. So I want to agree that, I've always been telling people we need to stop calling ourselves a minority in this country. So, when I worked on K-12 policy making, we had a phrase we started using, and I want all of us to start using it. Okay. And that is, we are the new majority of America. We are the new majority, so let's claim that, and let's walk up to the Hill together, and let's demand what our country needs, because we are the new face of the country.
And with that, ladies and gentlemen, how about a round of applause for our new majority panel? Thank you. This will conclude the second annual State of the HBCU address, ladies and gentlemen. Please check out the UNCF website for more information about the honor roll, policy priorities, and of course, scholarship programs. Once again, thank you for joining us and for your continued support of our HBCUs.